Signs of progress? Officials from Russia and Ukraine have met for a fourth round of talks with an aim to end the violence. We have the latest on the military conflict, including a heartfelt plea for peace from Pope Francis. Vatican diplomat. The Holy Father's ambassador to a Central American nation has been asked to leave the country. And taking their best shot. A significant number of Catholic schools are included in the March Madness. We'll explain. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, March 14th, 2022. Thank you so much for being with us tonight on this Feast of St. Matilda. I'm Tracy Sabol. Officials from Russia and Ukraine have held a new round of talks today. The aim is to end the military conflict. The sides spoke by video link. However, no agreement was reached, but more discussions are scheduled for tomorrow. Meantime, Russian forces continue to move closer to the country's capital city. Philip Crowther, Associated Press international affiliate reporter, joins us now from Lviv, Ukraine. Philip, good to see you. What is the situation there right now? I understand yesterday there was an attack on a military base near Lviv. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, and it was a deadly attack on a military training facility not too far from here and actually very close to the Ukrainian border with Poland as well. Explosions there could be heard in Poland, could be heard from here as well, by the way, and could be seen from the other side of the border. This was a military training facility that had been used by NATO and the United States to train their colleagues in the Ukrainian army, and maybe it was seen as a little symbol too far of Ukrainians' integration with NATO by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Any which way, 35 people died in that attack, at least over 130 people injured, according to the Ukrainian military. And all of this, of course, leads to a lack of calm in this city here in Lviv, which had been a peaceful place and still is a peaceful place within a country at war. This is where so many refugees are passing through. Remember, 2.8 million have fled Ukraine so far. And this is also a city that is very important for the distribution of humanitarian aid, but also for weapon shipments. And that is why the fear here is that the Russian forces will get interested in this part of the country.
Philip, what about Mariupol? I understand things are particularly dire there and that a major evacuation operation took place. What more can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm afraid it won't be a major operation. The idea was that it would be, but all we have right now is the knowledge that 60 civilian cars, according to local authorities, were making their way out of Mariupol. We don't know how many people were on board those cars, and we don't know at this point whether they will in fact make it to a safe place. Remember that for a week or so, there have been daily attempts to create ceasefires and humanitarian corridors and safe passages for civilians out of besieged cities. And the priority has always been Mariupol. There have been agreements on that southeastern city here in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine, but all of those ceasefires have been violated by Russia over the last few days. Today, a little glimmer of hope that one of those ceasefires might hold. Absolutely no chance of a general ceasefire, though, here in Ukraine. That same city of Mariupol still being struck constantly by Russian missiles and by Russian artillery fire.
And Philip, what is the biggest concern right now, especially where you are?
Well, it's an extension of this war, if you will, into the West, because this war has been pretty much fought in the center of the country, in the east of the country, as already had been the case for 8 years, with Russian-backed separatists fighting the Ukrainian army in the east of the country. But now it has moved somewhat westwards, not with soldiers on the ground, but with those airstrikes, not just close to here, to the city of Lviv here in the west, but also two other cities, Lutsk further north from here, Ivano-Frankivsk south from here. All three cities have been hit, but these have been military airfields in the case of the other two cities. In the case of Lviv, a military training facility. These have been relatively pinpointed attacks, no attacks on the cities themselves. But I can tell you from people I've spoken to here in Lviv that there is a fear that this war could get closer and that there could be bombing raids here in the city of Lviv and other western cities as well. So far, during this whole Russian invasion of Ukraine, the west of the country had been spared until those attacks over the weekend.
Well, Philip, we're praying for your safety and, of course, everyone in Ukraine. Thank you so much for your reporting. Well, the Vatican also is weighing in on the military conflict in Ukraine. Yesterday, Pope Francis made a heartfelt appeal to end the violence.
E chi appoggia la violenza ne profana il nome.
At a Sunday talk with pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father prayed for progress in the negotiations for peace. He also lamented the reports of women and children being killed in some of the attacks and asked all countries to welcome those who are fleeing the fighting. Joining us now from Rome is Andreas Tannhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Andreas, great to see you. Can you tell us more about what Pope Francis had to say yesterday?
Sure. Thank you, Tracy. Yesterday, more than 25,000 people came to the traditional Angelus prayer to St. Peter's Square. While the prayers are popular for pilgrims and locals to attend, this is indeed a huge number. It shows that people have a deep need to do something about the situation here in Europe, about the war in Ukraine. They resort to prayer and come to the church to do just that. In the past, the Pope had found strong words to denounce the Russian invasion in Ukraine. But yesterday, before the masses of people who came to make a stand for peace, he was even clearer. With an aching heart, he said, I add my voice to that of the common people who implore the end of the war. In the name of God, Pope Francis continued, listen to the cry of those who suffer and put an end to the bombings and the attacks. He condemned the barbarism of Russia's reported attacks on civilians, including pregnant women and children. Tracy, this is more than just words. This is a clear call for an immediate ceasefire.
Yeah, and strong words indeed, Andreas. What can a Catholic Church and the Holy Father, though, really do in a situation like this?
Well, there are three things that can be done, and that are being done right now, in fact. First of all, the people in the Ukraine, the civilians, they need our help. There's no better immediate network than the net of parishes and church groups that right away organized efficient humanitarian help for those fleeing the fight, those not able to leave, and those deciding to stay in the country. There are many examples, but one would be also the Knights of Columbus, who are also present in Poland and the Ukraine, who right away started to organize health convoys in a structured, efficient way. Of course, Caritas and many congregations are using their channels to bring help to the people. The second thing is diplomacy. The Vatican does not have military powers, no weapons, but some of the best diplomats in the world. And from the very beginning, Pope Francis and the Secretariat of State, headed by Cardinal Parolin, have used their ties to the Russian state and to the Russian Orthodox Church to first stop and then soften the war. Measuring success on this level is almost impossible, as we might never know what really happened without the Pope personally going to the Russian embassy to the Holy See or sending two of his highest-ranking cardinals to the Ukraine. The attacks might have even been fiercer and more deadly. And diplomacy, even when we see all those atrocious images, is important. I, for example, spoke with Russians living here in Italy, and there's a deep sentiment of not being understood by the West. Now, that doesn't sanction what is happening in Ukraine, but ensuring an openness to discuss is very important. And thirdly, and in my opinion, this is the most important thing, is prayer. Also, Pope Francis has been very clear on that point all along. Even before the attacks began, he designated Ash Wednesday as a day of prayer and fasting for Ukraine. He continued to motivate the faithful throughout the world to start prayer groups and initiatives for an end of the war. It's times like these that test our faith, not just the one of our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, but also our own. Do we really believe that God works, that prayer is not futile, but actually can move mountains and hearts?
And Andreas, before I let you go, what about our offices in Ukraine, the EWTN offices in Ukraine? Have you heard anything about them?
Well, from what we've heard, what I understand is that our team left Kiev and is now further to the west, where there are fewer and less fierce attacks. they're still broadcasting. As we all know, the situation is deteriorating as more and more civilian targets are being attacked. A very sad example of this reality was mentioned also by Pope Francis just yesterday. Russia should immediately stop, he said, the shelling of Mariupol in the south of the country. It's a city of 400,000, which was founded and named for the Virgin Mary. The Pope said to cease the armed aggression before the city is reduced to a cemetery.
Well, Andreas, thank you so much for your report today. We really appreciate it. Andreas Tannhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tracy.
President Joe Biden sends a message of support for Ukraine while his national security team tries to shore up support overseas. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, good evening to you. Tonight, President Joe Biden is reportedly considering his own trip to Europe as the war in Ukraine intensifies. But White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said today the U.S. wants to keep consulting with NATO allies, adding no presidential trip has been announced.
President Joe Biden addresses local leaders from across America.
A big part of the reason we're so successful is because the rescue plan went directly to you.
The president also told the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference,
make no mistake, the current spike in gas prices is largely the fault of Vladimir Putin.
Meanwhile, as war rages in Ukraine, this video showing rescuers evacuating people from a residential building hit by Russian shelling in the capital. President Joe Biden's national security team meets with its Chinese counterparts in Rome. The U.S. says Russia is asking China for military help, but the Kremlin denies that accusation. President Biden tweeted, "We are continuing the close cooperation with allies and partners to make sure that the Ukrainian people can defend their nation." The United States has committed more than $1.2 billion in security assistance to Ukraine over the last year. First Lady Jill Biden is also speaking out about the war in Ukraine. She says the senselessness is staggering.
My heart has ached watching videos of Ukraine. Sick kids fleeing on makeshift medical trains. The unthinkable bombing of a maternity ward.
And this stark warning from aid groups, the war in Ukraine could make hunger and famine in war-torn Yemen even worse than it is now, because Yemen gets wheat from Ukraine. Meanwhile, the U.S. is condemning an Iranian missile attack near the American consulate in Erbil in northern Iraq. No injuries. Iran said it was retaliation for another attack.
Also tonight, we're learning that this Wednesday, Ukrainian President Zelensky will deliver a video address to Congress, which of course just approved billions of dollars for Ukraine. And a recent Quinnipiac University poll shows 42% of Americans approve of how President Biden is handling the war in Ukraine, 45% disapprove. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
The conflict with Russia will not leave a U.S. astronaut stranded in space. The Kremlin says that it will give Mark Vande Hei a ride back to Earth later this month. Initially, it was feared the Russians would not bring him home. The American astronaut has been working aboard the International Space Station for nearly 1 year. Coming up, a Supreme Court justice weighs in on court packing. Plus, end around. Congressional Democrats ponder how to push the Biden agenda. Well, a lot going on in Ukraine, but also here in the United States, including on the southern border. And joining me now is Michael Knowles, host of the Michael Knowles Show. Michael, welcome back. Great to see you. A lot to get to today, but I want to start with the border. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is cracking down on non-prescription fentanyl, an issue that he links to a lack of security at the border. Meanwhile, just a few days ago, 5 cadets from West Point overdosed on fentanyl-laced cocaine while on spring break in Florida. Michael, I want to get your thoughts on that and what we're seeing at the border.
Well, these problems are connected. Lax border enforcement is going to exacerbate this problem. Weak criminal justice enforcement is going to exacerbate this problem. But I think what we are finally seeing as America enters its worst opioid crisis ever, one of the worst drug challenges that we've ever had in this country, it reminds us that drug dealing is not a victimless crime or a harmless crime, as people sometimes tell us. The average life expectancy in the United States is now declining. It's declined for several years because of deaths of despair, in particular, suicides and drug overdoses. This issue of drug overdoses has hit young Americans in particular. These are not victimless crimes, okay? And so when you look at an issue like the drug crisis, some people on the left and the right, frankly, will tell you, well, the solution is to legalize more drugs. That would seem to be insane. Many people looking around at the crime crisis in the country, they say, well, the solution is criminal justice reform. We have an over-incarceration problem. No, we don't. We have an under-incarceration problem. We have a massive drug problem, and we've got a problem at the border. They are all related, and a little more enforcement, a little more justice would go a long way toward helping the country.
Yeah, I want to go kind of veer to on a different note here. As you know, nearly all of us here in the U.S. are feeling pain at the pump with these soaring gas prices. Now, according to AAA, the national average is now $4.32 a gallon. Let's talk about these rising gas costs and that trickle-down effect. I'm wondering, what's your biggest concern?
My concern is that the politicians who led us into this mess won't take any responsibility for it, and they won't change their policies. Joe Biden's strategy right now is to blame everything on Vladimir Putin. Obviously, the war in Ukraine has caused a surge in the gas prices, but gas was spiking long before Putin ever invaded Ukraine. It's spiking because of the energy policy of this president, Joe Biden. And so what you're seeing is a huge increase. Now, 52% higher gas prices today than they were 1 year ago. Meanwhile, Biden shuts down American energy production, shuts down the Keystone XL pipeline. And by the way, even on foreign policy, Joe Biden is cozying up to countries like Iran, for instance, which is compromising our relationship with countries such as Saudi Arabia. It's throwing a huge wrench into a lot of American energy, and we're paying the price for that at the pump. So the question I would have for President Biden is, what's next? How are you going to fix this problem? And so far, the White House has done nothing. They've shrugged their shoulders. Biden himself says there's not a lot I can do. It's Russia's fault. Well, the buck doesn't stop with Russia, sir. The buck stops with you. And until we have a clear articulation of what's going on, we're not going to get any solution.
Yeah, Michael, you mentioned Saudi Arabia, and according to the Wall Street Journal, the leaders of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates actually declined President Biden's phone calls to discuss oil. Help us unpack that, and what do you think that signals?
Well, the reason for that is that Joe Biden has stabbed Saudi Arabia in the back and has cozied up to Saudi Arabia's enemy, Iran, for absolutely no reason. During the Obama administration, Obama and Biden cozied up to Iran and put Iran on the course toward getting a nuclear weapon. This scared Iran's rivals in the region, including Saudi Arabia. When President Trump came in, he pulled us out of the Iran agreement, which was the right policy. Now we're trying to go back into that under Biden's leadership. Joe Biden has been on the wrong side of every foreign policy issue for the past 20 or 30 years. He infamously said that a rising China was good for the whole world and would help the United States. We've seen how that policy has turned out. So we know how disastrous his policies have been on the domestic front, most notably when he blasphemously calls himself a Catholic while supporting heinous abortion policies up until the point of birth, practically, abortion on demand without apology. Well, that wrong-headedness, that lack of judgment applies to the foreign sphere as well. And so these errors, these unforced error after error, are compounding on themselves, and it's going to hurt the energy sector. It's already hurting the energy sector. It's hurting national security. It's hurting America's place in the world.
Michael, we have probably about 30 seconds left or so, but curious what else you're following right now.
Well, obviously, I think a lot of the focus is on Ukraine, and the focus is on Ukraine because we were told by our leaders that Vladimir Putin, he probably won't invade. Okay, if he does invade, it won't be a big deal. If it's a minor incursion, that's fine. It's not a big deal. Now, Putin is threatening nuclear war. We are told that bioweapons facilities that first we were told did not exist. Now we were told by the Pentagon that they're very afraid that the Russians will seize them. And so this is a fraught moment. It's extraordinarily dangerous. World wars have started for less, and we need serious, good judgment in our political leaders to try to constrain this conflict to what would be a regional dispute. I think Zelensky is pushing for that now, but with a madman like Putin and with incompetence in the West, the situation remains extraordinarily dangerous.
Yeah, very, very concerning, Michael. Thank you so much for coming on. Always appreciate your input. Well, a Catholic Supreme Court justice says that he is against adding to the number of justices to the nation's highest court. Justice Clarence Thomas also says that he is concerned about the lack of civil debate in the U.S. and worries over the long-term effects of cancel culture. Justice Thomas was speaking at an event in Utah late last week. He did not address the future of Roe versus Wade, the landmark Supreme Court decision that legalized abortion. Well, House Democrats are back from their policy retreat, and they are looking to get a number of things done before the election season hits full stride. They have come up with a new strategy, have President Joe Biden pass his agenda through executive orders.
Several of us have been encouraging the president to do the significant research that's necessary and to use that method to help kickstart recovery.
Executive orders bypass Congress and last until the end of the term. President Biden's would expire in early 2025. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is eyeing parts of the Build Back Better agenda as a possible boost to the economy.
It's important to dispel some of those who say, well, it's the government spending. No, it isn't. The government spending is doing the exact reverse, reducing the national debt.
But Republicans tell EWTN News Nightly they've heard it all before.
Most of the Build Back Better proposal, which is about $5 trillion in total spending, about $3.5 trillion of that would go on the debt as well. So it's more spending, it's more debt, it's higher taxes, it's all the things, the opposite of what you would do if you were trying to combat inflation.
Congressman Lloyd Smucker and member of the Ways and Means Committee agrees.
It's a theme that we hear from this president. Always look to government for the answer. No concern about how to pay for these.
Democrats claim Republicans have blocked their agenda, so they're also pushing President Biden to use executive orders for tax credits, policing, voting rights, and immigration. Up next, a Vatican diplomat has been expelled from Nicaragua. How the Holy See is responding. Plus, the March Madness brackets are out. We'll tell you how many Catholic schools are in. The Vatican is reacting after Nicaragua expels the Holy See's top diplomat in the country, reportedly without giving a reason. The Holy See says Monsignor Valdemar Stanislav Somertag had tried to promote good relations with the Central American country. The expulsion was the latest by Nicaragua's government against forces it believes are working against the country's president. In Mexico, one diocese says it will not give Holy Communion to politicians who recently voted to expand abortion. The diocese also will exclude those lawmakers from becoming godparents. The state recently voted to legalize abortion up to 13 weeks of pregnancy. And for more on this story, including a closer look at abortion throughout Mexico, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. A top appeals court in London has ruled against same-sex marriage in the Cayman Islands. It found that no such right existed in the island's constitution. The United Kingdom holds jurisdiction over several nations in the Caribbean. The head of Moldova's Orthodox Church has led prayers for peace in Ukraine. A Sunday service was filled with worshipers who prayed for an end to the military conflict. One attendee said, "We are all Christians and we want peace among all peoples and all countries." Moldova's population of 2.5 million people has been coping with the influx of refugees from Ukraine. In Jerusalem, video images of peace together with the Ukrainian and Russian flags were projected onto the old city walls. Last night's display showed Russia's red, white, and blue flag and the Ukrainian blue and gold flag. The projection contained images of two white doves with messages in Hebrew addressing the hope of peace, saying, quote, "waiting for you." And finally tonight, the pairings for the NCAA men's college basketball tournament were unveiled last night, and roughly 1/6 of the participants are Catholic schools. Among the field of 68 are 11 Catholic schools: Creighton, Gonzaga, Loyola Chicago, Marquette, Notre Dame, Providence, St. Mary's, California, St. Peter's, Seton Hall, the University of San Francisco, and Villanova. The tournament begins this week and ends in New Orleans on April 4th. And good luck to them all. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.